Hi, everybody. Let me grab this. Really nice to be with you today. I thought, the title of this program was, I think, Hiring the Team and Culture, and I decided to tweak it a bit. And so we can talk about that, but I'm going to talk about culture, and I'm going to talk about leadership and motivation. How many of you have ever taken leadership classes or in your life? Okay. And how many of you are in a startup today? How many of you are the CEO or senior leader of the startup? Excellent, excellent, excellent. So just a little background for this. Everything that I want to, you guys care about research as the basis for making decisions. And what I'm going to share with you today in a fairly accessible way is frameworks that are scientifically, rigorously been proven to be very strong as it pertains to leadership methods. So about 3 years ago, was asked if I teach a leadership class, and I thought, yeah, that'd be great. I've worked in industry for a long time, but I'd never read a leadership book in my life. Literally, had never done that. I had about a year to get ready for it, and so I was lucky enough that in the University of Washington Foster School of Business is a Center for Leadership and Strategic Thinking. And I went to them and I bowed before them and I said, fill up my brain with everything you can. And so I spent a year reading. And the beauty of that experience of doing that for a year was that the leading theories about what great leaders do completely jived with my intuition about what they do. And I think when you look at what I'll talk about today, you'll probably nod your head. And the tough part is, how do you become that, right? And what I've learned is that if you can get the leadership bug to bite you, meaning you get interested in this, it will engage you, and it'll be a really, really enjoyable process for you, because leadership development is really about personal development. I mean, it's really about you growing as a human being, motivating other human beings. And whether that you do that as a parent or as a football coach or as a leader of a startup or with any group of people, church, an association, anything, it can be extremely satisfying. And I would also argue, by the way, hello to the folks in Spokane and on the web. I'll do my very best to engage you from here. Grab a piece of paper and a pencil because I'm going to have you do some work. The thing that might be worth thinking about is that in many ways, the role you play as a leader will outlast and probably leave a longer legacy in the world, potentially, than the products and services you sell. Or they could be equivalent, right? So you have an ability as the leader of an organization to fundamentally affect other human beings in a really positive way. And so what we're going to talk about today is 7 questions, and I'd like to make this like a workshop. So please grab a piece of paper that's laying on your desk, grab a pen, and we're going to explore some questions. And going to have you put some answers down, and I'm going to give you only a short period of time as I ask these questions, because I just want to get your first stream of consciousness, kind of your gut feel. There is no right answer here. What it is we want to kind of get a sense of what you're thinking today, and then I'll share some thoughts, and then maybe you'll walk out of this with a piece of paper that says, this is version 1.0 of my personal leadership development. Because like anything else that you do in life, if you plan it, you have a much higher odds of succeeding in achieving the goals. And so I'm a big believer in putting together a leadership development plan, right? So any questions at this point? Because I'm going to start powering some stuff at you. We got 1 hour together. I thought I'd make you work for this hour because you're getting fed. Burn up some of those calories. Okay, so 7 questions we're going to talk about today. So the first one is, are leaders born or made? How many people believe, generally speaking, leaders are born? How many people believe leaders are made? Okay, good answer. It's interesting. When you look at the data and you ask, what are the attributes that come in the package that's you from your DNA, and what comes through environment and influences and experiences, generally speaking, about 30% of your skills relative to how you might be a leader, i.e. your personality, your intelligence, and your emotional makeup, a good portion of that is in the package that comes at birth. But a 70% or more of who you can become as a leader is entirely learnable. This is stuff you can learn, okay? And so this matters because if you think that you're, and you don't, that's good, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people I speak to kind of think you either got it or you don't as a leader. And granted, there's certain personality makeup that contribute more positively, perhaps, to being an inspirational kind of style of personality. But the reason it's important is because if you think you're born, then you have a fixed view of who you are and what you can become. Whereas if you think it's made, then you have a much more developing and learning orientation. And that's the key to becoming a better leader, is because you really have to do self-reflection. And that's not something that everybody does. Maybe some of us, when we grew up, wrote diaries. Maybe you didn't. But the active pursuit of self-reflection is really, really important to developing your leadership skills. So how are you going to do this? How do you develop your leadership skills? Well, you're not going to do it all at once. It's going to take time. It's going to be in your own way. You are not to try to become perfectly the leader that you see in somebody else. You're going to grab pieces of who they are. You're going to notice things that they do, and you say, you know what, that resonates with me. I'm going to remember that and evoke that. But you're not trying to become somebody else. Everybody has the ability to be an effective leader in their own style and in their own way. But you're going to do this from taking good and bad experiences from life. You're going to get this by putting a plan together. You're going to get this by experimenting, which means some things will work and some things won't. It is the scientific method. You're going to make a little bit of a hypothesis about what you might need to do to change. You're going to test that out, and sometimes it's going to be fantastic, and sometimes it's going to fail brilliantly, right? And you're going to get a lot of your leadership from role models and then from reading and learning. There are actually lots of great resources out there today that are scientifically based. I'm going to talk about one of them in a little bit that translates quite a bit of scientific theory into a very simple framework that, having read all the scientific work and I look at the end product of the more accessible book, said that's perfect, that's fine, that achieves the objective of communicating what's important when you think about effective leadership. Okay, so first point is you guys can do this. A big part of this is self-reflection. So the second point I'd suggest is important to talk about is this journey you're about to embark on. Startups are very hard. Startups are marathons. They're not 400-yard dashes or 200-yard dashes. It takes a lot of psychic energy to be a leader of a small company, right? And I would suggest that there is a way to think about this psychic energy, right? And I would put it in a framework about capital. You have psychological capital, okay? So let's talk about the different kinds of capital you might already know about, and we'll introduce this concept called psychological capital. So you all know about economic capital, right? That's kind of what you have. That's how much money you have. That's what you possess tangibly, right? That's your economic capital. You have human capital. This is your experience, your knowledge, and your skills, your domain knowledge, right? This is what you bring in terms of a set of capital to anything in life. You bring your assets and your money, you bring your skills and your talents and your education, and then you bring social capital, and that's the people who you know, the relationships you have, right? Your network, your friends, your contacts. So you've got what you have, which is your economic capital. You have what you know, which is your human capital, and you have your who you know, which is your social capital. Well, there's one other concept that's there, which is really who you are. And the question is, how much positive psychological capital do you have? Or can you build so that you can weather the journey you're about to go down, right? And if you're conscious of these elements, then you're probably more likely to be able to say, oh, I can work on those things. Okay, so here's the first framework, which is this framework called psychological capital. It's very well recognized in the scientific domain, right, of human psychology. Okay, and there's 4 ingredients to it, and there is an acronym that is represented by it, HERO, H-E-R-O. And what it is the capacity to address challenging situations, including change. It's the human capacity to deal with challenging situations and change, which you are all going to experience every single day as a startup leader, right? It's a tough, tough job to be a startup leader. It's exciting, it's up and down, but it is very challenging, especially because in any CEO role, you know, you're kind of the quote, lonely at the top, right? But at least in maybe bigger organizations, you have people you can go talk to, right? In a small startup, it's tough to be able to be completely candid about the fears you're feeling or the challenges you're experiencing with the team, which is why it's good to have advisors, and you're going to get board members and you're going to get colleagues who are going to be your sounding boards for that. So here's the 4 pieces of it, okay? You've seen them, there's a movie they made out of this, right? Hope is the scientific terms, but it's okay, you'll get it. Hope, the second one is efficacy. Hope, efficacy, meaning confidence, resiliency, and optimism. These are the elements of having strong, positive psychological capital. And it can be developed. And instead of going deeply into all the elements of what you can do to develop these things, today I want to run through a few frameworks. And then once you figured out which ones you think you want to kind of work on as we go through this, then we can talk a little bit about how you might do that, right? But that's the beginning of the plan, is to kind of identify the things that are important for you. So basically, hope is a positive approach to goals. It is not naive belief in what you can do. It's really this idea that you have desire, determination, grit is an indicator of hope. The expression, where there's a will, there's a way, is an expression that aligns with hope. This is the idea that you have drive and determination and ingenuity. You will work around obstacles. My guess, by the way, is that most of you will say at the end of this little piece, I've got pretty good psychological capital. My guess also is there'll be one piece where you'll go, I need to work on that, because I think every human has to work on it because it's very difficult. So that's hope, right? And so I guess the thing to ask yourself is, how much grit do I have, right? The second one is efficacy, which is basically the confidence you have that you can deal with challenging situations without basically folding, right? How do you work through difficult situations, right? And it's really your belief. And if you don't have that confidence, there are ways to build your confidence that you can get through challenging situations. But that's one element of this psychological makeup that you have, right? Do you have grit? Do you have confidence? Or what's the degree of confidence you have that you can navigate through difficult things? You're going to get a really tough experience that's going to be thrown at you. How confident are you that you'll find a way to get through it, okay? And it means that you are willing to learn and think in new kinds of ways. That's efficacy. Resiliency is the one that I think all of us have always have to work on, especially if we get hit with really hard things in life. But this idea is that you're able to bounce back from problems, from adversity, from stress, from change, right? Because if you do allow it to knock you down and you can't get back up, it's going to be very hard to run this marathon, right? So that's the third one, resiliency. And then finally is optimism, which is a little different than hope, which is that you have this realistic belief in positive outcomes, right? You're not Pollyannish, but you believe that there's a positive way to get to where you're trying to go, right? So basically, if it's really stressful and people are bringing you really, really bad stuff, do you communicate them like, we'll figure it out? I had a boss I worked for. I mentioned earlier that you're going to pick up things from people you admire as leaders. I picked up many things from this individual. In fact, as I look now, I'm an old guy, I look back, I can see inside of my style in working with people the remnants, the pieces of other human beings that have kind of come into me. His mastery was the art of saying no problem. No matter how terrible things were, I was a 26-year-old and I brought him stuff that was freaking me out, and he just looked at me and goes, oh, no problem, we'll figure it out. And it just completely relaxed me, because like, oh, he is not taking on my attitude of desperation. So optimism is a very powerful tool as a leader to help other people, your followers, navigate difficult times? Okay, so first question is, of hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism, on the piece of paper, please write down the one area you feel strongest about and the one area where you would like to do some personal development. 2 minutes. Okay. Next concept, which is where do you currently spend your time, or do you want to spend your time between leading and managing? So what's the difference between leading and managing? What's leading? Bark it out. What's leading? What does leading mean? What does leading mean? Inspiring. What does leading mean?
Providing a vision.
Providing a vision. What's leading mean?
Encouraging people to do something.
Encouraging people to do something. Yes?
Create a culture.
Creating a culture. It's okay. What's managing? What's managing?
Checking that people did their task
Checking if people did their task correctly.
correctly.
What's managing? What's managing?
Setting programs and goals.
Setting programs and goals. What's managing?
Compliance.
Compliance. Awesome. You already know the difference. Here's one way to think about it conceptually. Managing is dealing with complexity. Leadership is dealing with change. You need to do both in the role as a CEO of a startup. You're dealing with complexity. You're dealing with change. The kinds of things that kind of fall into, as you just mentioned, managing are setting your company goals. We don't want, in the midst of complexity, we have to have a clean set of goals. Defining roles and responsibilities of people. Building processes to run the business. Ensuring things are accountable, dashboards, all those things, right? That is managing because you're trying to manage complexity, right? Dealing with change is what leadership about, which is really motivating human beings. You're communicating a compelling vision. These are examples. Creating and supporting a strong culture, you mentioned this. Motivating performance. Coaching, which is different than counseling. Coaching is, hey, how can I help you work through a difficult situation? Counseling is, I'm noticing a challenge that you're experiencing, either in your attitude or your performance. I need to counsel you on that, right? That's dealing with change, right? So I guess I would ask you, what's the mix of time you spend today on each of those two? Write those down on a piece of paper. How much time would you say you spend on managing as a percentage? How much time do you spend on leading? What percent of 100 would you allocate to both today? And I guess the question is, do you feel that those things are in balance appropriately for where you are in the business, right? It's very easy to get into the managing, right? But you have to remember that you are moving a crew of humanoids towards a goal. You are very vested. This is your baby in most cases, right? How do you make everybody feel as invested as you are or close to? They'll never feel like that, but yes.
Will that percentage change as the size of your
will that percentage change as the size of the organization changes? The time you spend as a leader will change on these things. As your company grows, you're going to be spending more time on leadership after you get your managerial processes in place and you build your organization who is going to take care of 99% of the managing of your business. And as the leader, you are inspiring a vision, right? You are helping to make sure the culture is healthy and appropriate for the company, right? You are a role model for the way you hope people will behave. So your role as a leader as a company grows increasingly gets more symbolic. It's very in the early stages, you're a coach. You're not really running an organization. You're a team leader, and you know you're in there. You're a coach player. And frankly, I'm a big believer in holding on to coach player as long as you can, always, right? It just is. You have a lot to contribute to the business, and people appreciate the fact that you're a coach player. You just have to be careful that in that role, because you want people to grow. And you don't want to be too much of a player that they feel like you're kind of running this thing, right? Did that answer your question? Okay. So I guess the second question we're asking ourselves, so first question is kind of like, what do I need to do if I think about this hard road ahead mentally? Second question is, where am I spending my time in these two categories of things, okay? Next one. Are you willing to evolve your theory of leadership? And now what's that mean? That means that you all today already have a theory of leadership. You have, because you're acting, when you ask somebody to go do something in your team, and you do or don't use some tool to motivate them to go do it, you're implementing some sort of theory you have about how to motivate other human beings, right? Right? I'd like you to take a minute to write down 3 words or 3 sentences which summarizes your philosophy about how to motivate other human beings. What do you think works in motivating other people? Okay, this is kind of your baseline set of values about the way you believe you can effectively move other human beings, right? The history of the study of leadership is actually fairly new. It's probably 60 to 75 years old. Because frankly, before that time, any theory was all about managing, right? It was kind of the how to run a bureaucratic machine effectively, right? And there have been, like in any other domain of knowledge, waves of theories and thinking. The current set of thinking, which is what I learned about during this year of getting my act together about how to talk about leadership, completely resonated with the way I was thinking, and I sense it would probably resonate with the way you're thinking about that. And the way to capture it is called full-range leadership. And that means you have a set of tools in your toolbox as a human to motivate other people. And it ranges from very transactional kinds of things you do with other people to get them to do things that you hope they'll do, to very inspirational things that you do to hopefully get them to do what they do, right? The transactional side, technically, is called contingent reward. I hire you for this job, you do this, I will pay you every month, I'll give you a bonus at the end of the year. It's a contract, you know, we have an agreement, this is your role, right? It's kind of a quid pro quo. You have a relationship with another human on your team to go do some work, and it's kind of a contract. And transactional kind of, and in the worst kind of cases, it's carrot and stick, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about healthy transactional kind of leadership, right? People want to know what their role is. They want to know what they're accountable for. They want to know what success looks like. They want to know what they're going to get paid, right? All these basic things, right? And frankly, you can get a good amount on transactional leadership, but you're not going to ever get the full 110% of what a human can give to you, because we have innate desires that are becoming more and more important in an age where most work is not rote and mechanized. It's very heuristic work, right? And there is a theory set called self-determination theory that was translated into a book to be made accessible to most of us, and it was called Drive. Any of you read this book, Drive? Right. And basically what self-determination theory is about, and which Drive is about, says basically all humans care about three things when it comes to work to keep them inspired and keep them motivated. They care about autonomy, they care about mastery, and they care about purpose. They want to feel in control of the work they are doing. They want to feel as if their skills are growing and they are developing. And they want to feel that they're doing that in the service of something meaningful. And that these things are more important to people than money. Money is only a question when it's not generally market rate or fair relative to other people. That's what makes people grumpy. Most people are not motivated by money. They just want a fair wage for what they're doing. What they're motivated by are these kinds of things, kind of self-actualization kinds of things, right? Which is not surprising given the modern world we live in which most of our basic needs are covered. So these are three concepts that I think are really worthwhile to think about as a leader, because your behaviors are going to encourage or not encourage these three things, right? And you can see why. If you are micromanaging, you're not giving autonomy, right? You're basically saying, here's what I want you to do. If you are defining in very narrow terms what somebody's success is or their role is, you're kind of limiting their feeling that they can actually become great at something, right? And if it's all in the service of nothing that's clear, then there's no internal belief that there's a higher purpose or a greater purpose that you're pursuing. I learned this lesson personally when I ran an organization, and I thought I was doing everything great because I totally believed in where we were going. And I was excited for the possibilities, and I was giving people free rein. Hey, here's your kind of role, go with it. And I wanted to make it, but after about a year, the team came up to me and they go, Ken, where are we trying to go? What is this all about? We're all working hard and we're all doing some really interesting things, but like, what's this all about? And you as a startup leader have this ability to get people really excited about this purpose. Okay. I mentioned that there's this thing called full range leadership, and we have this transactional leadership, which is really important. We got to get some things very clear. But what we learned is that, and this is not surprising, I'm sure for many of you, I'm sure you'd nod when you hear this, is that the kind of leader that really motivates us to be the most of who we can be provides those three things by operating in a certain kind of way. And these are called transformational leaders. They actually work to transform their followers into being better and better professionals, being better human beings, better at becoming leaders themselves. Because basically the job at the end of the day of a leader is to make more leaders. That's kind of job one at the end of the day. You're trying to help them tell other people they're working with, or work with other people to become autonomous, to master their work, to feel a purpose for their work, right? So your job is to kind of get all this stuff and make other people leaders, right? And so I'm going to translate the academic framework of transformational leadership into very simple terms that you'd nod your head to. The good thing about all this is not surprising, is it? It's kind of good news that the proof is that this is the stuff that actually moves people. And I guess I'd like you to take a minute and just write 4 words to describe what you think somebody you admire as a leader does. 4 words that says, this, you know what this person does so well? They do this. Just grab the 4 words that come to mind. Okay, let's start listing some of these words. Can you start shouting them out?
Open.
Open.
Empowering.
Empowering.
Passionate.
Passionate.
Respectful.
Respectful.
Direct.
Direct. Where was that? Direct.
Compromise.
Compromise. Compromise?
Listens.
Listen.
Communicates.
Communicates.
Recognizes.
Recognizes. You know, it's interesting. I teach this class on leadership, and I ask the students to write it on the board. I say, use words to describe what people you really admire as leaders are, and how do they make you feel? And I take a picture of that every time, and I've done 3 or 4 of these classes now, and the same words keep coming again and again. We all know what great leaders do. Challenge is, how do you become that, right? It takes work. It takes a plan to say, what do I need to work on, and how am I going to go try some experiments in behavior to change? And so when we start the class that I teach, we actually start with something called a developmental readiness assessment. The concept is this: I can tell you a lot of ideas about what great leaders do, but that doesn't make any difference to how you're going to behave if you're not developmentally ready to change the way you think. So at the end of the day, no matter what I say, the most important question might be, how open are you to try new things? Because if you balance your performance orientation with a really strong, healthy learning orientation, you can transform the way you motivate other people. And in the process, you'll get a really cool satisfaction out of doing that. And the great thing is from experience, and now I'm getting an old guy, is the more you do these things that you admire other people that we've just used, the happier the teams are, the more productive they are. So it really works. So you described some of those words. So we said transactional leadership is this. You got to do that. You got to define roles, responsibilities, all that. Here's some of the things that transformational leaders do. Technical terms are called idealized influence, the 4 I's. Idealized influence, intellectual stimulation, inspirational motivation, individualized consideration. That's an easy way to not remember something. So let me tell you how to remember this. You role model. Great transformational leaders role model the behavior they expect of others. Great transformational leaders encourage creativity and challenge and force people to think. Really challenge them to think and develop. Transformational leaders motivate and inspire. So there is a motivational element to these leaders. And then finally, they personalize leadership. That means they look at Albert and the role that he has and how developmentally ready Albert is to take on a challenging assignment. And they go, Albert, I want you to go do that thing. And hopefully Albert just simmers a little bit. You want him to simmer a little bit. It's called adaptive conflict. You actually want people to grow, and the way you're going to grow is to make them a little uncomfortable. You just don't want them to boil, right? Boil is not a good thing, right? And so they individualize, and so they determine how far can I stretch folks, right? That's the idea. So again, role model encourages creativity, people to think, motivate and inspire, personalized leadership. These kind of leaders challenge their followers. They are willing to be vulnerable, admit their mistakes, admit that they don't know something. They are conscious that their goal is to develop their team. That's what they're doing, right? Because you've got all these business objectives, right? None of this doesn't mean you don't go march and try to get your startup off the ground and running. But from the very earliest stages, you can have a big influence in how you want your team to think about what they're able to accomplish. And they kind of have a mental development plan in their head for everybody. Okay, so on your piece of paper, take 30 seconds. If you were to think about some area that you'd like to work on, is it walking the talk? Is it inspiring others? Is it individualizing the way you lead other people? Or is it challenging your team intellectually? And that means that challenging them also push back on you. So which one would you want to spend some time on? Walking the talk, inspiring others, individualizing, or challenging them. Okay. So, talked a little bit about kind of getting yourself, what might you want to work on in terms of the kind of the emotional challenge that you're going to be facing going forward. We talked a little bit about kind of what's your theory of motivating and what are some thoughts about what effective motivation framework, this kind of autonomy, mastery, purpose. We talked a little bit about the range of tools you have in your bag to motivate people, from just clear agreements about certain things to really getting great performance by kind of, and it's the fundamental difference is you are, in the first set, you're motivating by extrinsic motivation, money, position, title, affirmation. These are intrinsic motivations. You're moving from them from the inside out. And not surprisingly, that's a lot more powerful, right? You want to move people from the inside out, not the outside in. Carrots and sticks are outside in. Okay, so next, how are you going to build a really, really great culture for your business, right? Because you're building one right now. How many of you actually have a team? Okay, how many of you are solo on your own? Okay. Even for those who are solo and who are now going to start bringing in the first set of people, it's never too early to think about your culture. It is, in some ways, better to think about this now before you hire somebody than to hire a bunch of folks and then say, well, what kind of culture do I want? Right? Because you may have to reverse engineer the organization after you've done this, right? Let's see here. What's on the mind of every new employee? When they come into your business, what's on their mind? They're asking themselves, what is my identity and role in this business, right? Who am I supposed to be in this group, and what will be my role? It's what we'd all ask ourselves if we started a new job at some place, like, what am I supposed to do here? What role am I going to play here? The next question they're going to ask themselves is power and influence. Will my needs for influence and control be met? Some people have very low needs for influence. Some people have very high needs, and they want to know, am I going to actually have an impact here? Can I make an impact here? Or is the power structure such that that's going to be very difficult for me to do that? Are my needs and goals going to be met? You know, will this group allow me to meet my own needs, not just the company's needs? And what's this going to feel like? Is this going to be an intimate group? Am I going to be accepted? What's it like to work here, right? What's the relationship we're going to have? All of these you can affect by the company culture you set up. So when they come in, you've helped them answer that. They understand what their role is going to be, and they're going to understand kind of how decisions are made, so they'll understand how much influence they'll be able to have. You're going to understand what their needs are before they come in, and see if that matches what your culture is going to be able to give them, right? And finally, some people really want to work in a family environment. Some people want all business. The tone that you set for your culture in that regard is really up to you, but you want to make sure it matches what people are hoping for, right? So I like this expression from the chairman of Southwest Airlines: culture is what people do when no one is looking, right? And if you think about culture, think about it like an iceberg, okay? The very top, the stuff that's visible, that's the artifacts. That's the foosball table, the free beer on Fridays, the cool t-shirts, all that stuff. That is not culture, that's the artifact of culture. And some people think that's culture. I can tell you, you can have no foosball table and no fancy shirts and have an awesome culture. You can also have all of that stuff and have kind of a really dysfunctional culture. Because underneath are really the beliefs you talk about that are important, and underneath that are the assumptions about those and how you actually behave. So let me break this down for you. Culture, technically, is the values, the values, which is what's important. We say these are things that are important, and the norms. Here's your appropriate attitudes and behaviors, kind of like here's our values, here's behaviors by which people actually operate. Okay? So it's what you say, and it's what you actually do. Okay? So, go through this quickly. So, values are beliefs about what is good, right, or wrong. Here's how we make decisions here. Here's what we value. Here's what we don't value. And here's the behaviors we expect. And right? and the attitudes we're supposed to have, right? And the left one is what is intended, and the right one is actually what is affirmed, right? So you can say certain things, but do you do them, right? So, for example, you can say, we believe in honesty, service, and integrity in our business, which means please behave in this way. Push back on ideas you agree with. That's what we mean by honesty. When we mean service, do what's right for the customer. When we say integrity, follow up when you make a commitment, right? That's the value, that's the norm. So the question is, how much are you thinking already about the values by which you want people to operate? And what are examples of behaviors that exhibit that? And it's a really good exercise to start doing early on. You can let it evolve, but I would suggest you already have in your mind as the leader what kind of company you want to have. So it's more important than money or environment. It really impacts employee productivity and happiness. It directly ties to whether you'll retain people or not. And it affects your business. So, and your reputation. So let me show you what you can do. There's 3 things you can do with it to make your culture really powerful. Strategically relevant, strong, and I'll explain what that means, and adaptive, meaning you really focus on innovation and change. Strategically relevant means, that's the first question you have to ask. You're building a company culture, and your company does something. It's Southwest Airlines, in which they've decided, you know what, we're going to make the flying experience absolutely crazy fun. Or it's Nordstrom, in which their whole purpose is around kind of, we stand by your decision when you buy from us, right? That's cool. You can return things. Customer service is the core, right? So if you were to ask yourself, strategically to be successful in the market you're going to go into, in who you are as a company in the market, what is like core? Is it service? Is it quality? Is it timeliness? Is it friendliness? What is it that you think is important to really make it successful in the business? And ask yourself, all right, how am I going to make that part of the culture of our business? Because if you think those are important to drive your business forward, but yet you have kind of a different kind of culture, you're working against cross purposes to where your business is trying to go. Make sense? So the first question is it strategically relevant? And then so far as an example, Zappos, the shoe company, right? Their strategy is stated to be delivering happiness and wow customer service. And that's everything in that organization is about customer service, right? And I would wager you get a lot of that at Nordstrom when you train, right? Starbucks, anyone work at Starbucks? Ever? Right? I think that there is a belief around a really consistent quality experience for every single person who goes in there. Because you're buying a premium product. You're buying a $3 bunch of coffee, right? Hot water, right? So you want everybody who gets that to feel like it was custom made for them, right? And it's got their name. Ken, your coffee's ready, right? You can bet that whatever Starbucks is seeking to do and how it positions itself in the market, it's training its employees around a culture that supports that. So ask yourself, based on what I'm trying to get done, what kind of culture do I want to have? And that really affects the people you hire. Because if somebody could be very technically competent in some domain, but they don't have the values that align with the behaviors you need for that. Yes?
Trader Joe's.
Trader Joe's.
Every time you walk in there, they don't ask you the standard question like, hi, how are you doing? Usually it's a very personalized question, like, what are you doing this weekend? How was your week? I mean, it's an engaging question.
It's a personal, yeah, very personalized.
This guy walking around with those black beads in his neck, who walks around and just asks you, how are you? Can I help you find something?
Right, right. That's not something, you can teach some of that, but you're probably hiring for that. When they're interviewing something, they just say, is this person the kind of person who will be comfortable doing that? Absolutely, great example. So the first thing is kind of make it strategically smart, right? Then the second thing is this idea of being strong. And here's how you want to think about strong. Strong is 2 axes. It is basically how shared is the culture inside your business? Meaning, how much do people have a shared view of this is the kind of culture we have at our company? And how much do they actually walk the talk? So if there is very little shared view about what the culture is, right? And everybody does kind of what they want, you have a very weak culture, not surprisingly. But you can also have a weak culture if there's very little agreement on who we are, but there's a lot of intensity. And there you got warring factions, right? You've got people who are coming against each other because we haven't agreed on what's acceptable behavior and our norms. So either people don't really care, in which case there's just not much culture, or the people care intensely about it, but there's no agreement on it, so they're warring with each other. The other side is you can have really shared agreement on what it is your culture is, and you don't walk the talk, and then it's vacuous, right? That's kind of the culture where it's on the wall on a chart that says, we believe in these things, and then everything that's done in the business has nothing to do with those. That's a vacuous culture. Great culture is one in which there's a shared view of what we are about, and people walk the talk, right? And we know who's the most important person in the entire organization to walk the talk. You guys, right? Which means you have to really be conscious about how you are, what signals you're sending, right? People, it's amazing how people take cues from everything you do, right? I found that just the process of asking someone about something, they wonder whether I think they've done something wrong, or, no, I'm just asking the question, right? So I sometimes have to be very overt about, here's how I'm going to deal with you all. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. You do not have to do anything I ask about, right? I'm just kind of a curious human being, right? So sometimes you have to help people understand you as a leader because they are going to think things that you maybe didn't intend, okay? So where is this all going? Let's talk about the kind of culture you want. So the last one is, focusing on change. That's basically where you support risk-taking. You encourage people to experiment and so forth. I got to think that as a startup, this comes naturally to you. So here's some tools that can help you shape it. Obviously, the people you recruit, how you onboard them and help them understand the way you work, right? How you reward and recognize them for the things that are happening, right? And then you leading by example. So that's the toolkit you have. So you've decided the values that are important to you. You have some examples of those. You help the team see those. You have to actually work with them to develop it. You're going to have the most, what's interesting about startups is you will set the culture for the business for many years to come because it'll be your imprint, right? And then it will change over time. But being conscious up front about it is really helpful for people. So let's do a little exercise here on your piece of paper. Hold on, I'm going to go past this. I'd like you guys to please list 3 values by which you'd like your company to operate and an example of a behavior that illustrates that value. Is this attached to a speaker, by the way? Karen? Is there a speaker attached to this?
No.
Or should I just walk over and put my mic on it? Okay. I'll do that. So 3 values that you think are really important, the way your company would like to operate, and an example of what that really means. Okay. I threw a lot at you in a 1 hour period. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. I guess stepping back, we can talk about hiring if you want, but I think this stuff is much more meaningful for actually the success of your business. This is a wonderful journey you guys are on. It's really a lot of fun. I admire the courage that you all have to take on a new venture. It's one of the most exciting things you'll do in your life. And I'd encourage you, as you think about your day, which is already maxed out, to say, how do I set aside a little bit of time every day to reflect on either what I want to do that day and accomplish, or what I've done that day that you feel good about, that can give you your energy, that you're going to always be charging your battery, that kind of psycap, that's like your battery, right? You want to keep that battery charged. And this is the process of self-reflection, and it's really healthy. I want to end this thing with a video. Our football coach, the Seahawks, is actually a very impressive leader, aside from being a really good football coach. He embodies a lot of what transformational leaders do. And I found a clip of him being interviewed when he was at USC, and the epiphany he had in his life that really transformed him into being the coach he is today, which was he was coaching for 30 years, and he had this epiphany. And he just started writing things down about what he truly believed, right? And that became his method that he took forward, and then he ended up being incredibly successful from then on. And he's about to leave the stage, and he can't help himself, and he ends it with this, which I thought was funny. So do you think the sound will come out of this if I play it? Let me try something here. Sorry, guys. Give us a second here. We can see if we can get it out. Is that it? Okay, hold on, guys. Okay, well, you know what? We'll get you it. It's in the PowerPoint. Here's the point of it. He basically looks at the people and he says, go home and write down what's really important to you. Fill up journals. Sorry. Does that work? Testing. Bueller? Can you hear me? Testing? Yeah? No? Testing? Hello? Regardless, I'll just talk loudly. Sorry for the people in Spokane. He basically says, go home and write down what's really important to you. Fill up journals. He says, you may laugh at me, and you don't have to do it if you want to, but I'm telling you, it works. And I guess the idea here is, about self-reflection, is take some time to write down the things that you want to do to become the very best leader you can become. And if you put them on paper, that's the first step to realizing them in your life. And you've actually made a commitment to yourself that you're going to go do that. So thanks for listening. Hope there was some nuggets in there. And maybe, I guess the last question I was going to ask you is, what do you want to do with that piece of paper moving forward? Because that could be version 1.0 of your leadership development. I don't know. It could be the start of it. Anyway, I wish you very best. Way to go. Yes. Hello? Yes, yes. Sorry. Sorry. It's okay to talk? No, it's not in order. In fact, what's interesting is some people have one but not the other two, meaning they tell their teams, we're going to go change the world. We're going to climb this mountain. And then they micromanage people. So, yeah, it's not, you got to have all three. You have to have the vision of where you're trying to take people, and then you have to have the practice of giving them the ability to be autonomous. By the way, autonomy does not mean lack of accountability. That's not what that means. It means they're autonomous and accountable, right? But, yeah. Any other questions from Spokane? Okay, sorry, guys. Any other questions here? Yeah. Yes. It's a great question. How do you know you strike the right balance between leadership and management? The way that I do is I view kind of, I know this sounds really weird, I view leadership as like dessert, and management is is the plumbing, is what I have to do. Meaning I love to lead, do the leadership behaviors, but well, there are two answers. One is, in the earliest stages, it's a lot of leadership because you haven't figured out yet what your repeatable business model is that's profitable. So in the early stages, it's a lot of leadership. In a more established business, you don't go run ahead and do a bunch of inspirational stuff about how the world's going to change and all the great things you're going to do if you haven't laid the systems in place and the clarity in place about what people's roles are and how we're going to measure success and all that stuff. And so it is a balance of both, which is why if you're not particularly good at one or the other, find somebody who can co-found with you who is good at that. So find a yin-yangs. Find someone, if you're more inspirational and more visionary and motivational and very interested in people's ideas and don't take, don't wrap your ego in. You may have one part of the equation, and you may need to have someone with you who is better at the managerial functions in your business. But I guess I would say early stages, it's very much leadership, with the management being well-run experiments. Okay? As you grow, it continues to be leadership with now building managerial tools around the hiring, around the processes you need in the business, roles and responsibilities. Things are going to start to get more structured after you have done your kind of product market fit. You've got your first set of customers. You have convinced someone perhaps to give you some money to invest in you. You may not have a profitable business model yet. So like you've written on paper what you think you can do in the world. You've gone out there, you got some people to give you money to do that, and you're not sure if you can actually make money at it, but you've got things going. You're now getting some funding to start building up the business. That's when you're going to start putting more of the managerial practices in place. Generally. Any other questions? Great. There's more food back there. Thank you.